Turkey's President Erdogan launched an air and ground military invasion against the Syrian Democratic Forces, the main U.S. ally in the campaign to defeat ISIS. After just a few days, the fighting is forcing thousands of Christians, Kurds, Yazidis, and others to flee for their lives. The Turkish army and its allies pounded Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, from the air and the ground. The SDF lost more than 10,000 soldiers fighting ISIS. Now they're once again fighting for their lives and homes. The Turkish invasion includes the Free Syrian Army, jihadist troops who fight alongside Turkey, a NATO member. The Turkish invasion runs all the way across the nearly 300-mile northeast Syrian-Turkish border, from the town of Derek in the east all the way to Kobani in the west. The White House said Turkey had committed to three things: protect civilians, protect religious minorities, including Christians, and ensure no humanitarian crisis takes place. So far, all three have been violated. The fighting is forcing thousands to run for their lives. This woman asked, why did the Americans flee? Many have nowhere to go except the desert, and some humanitarian aid agencies are warning up to 250,000 residents may flee the fighting. Many civilians have been wounded. This is Morris Amsi, Bishop of the Orthodox Syriacs, visiting the wounded from the Turkish invasion. These are some of the others wounded in the past 3 days, including this 10-year-old boy. In a rare move, Syriac church bells in northeast Syria rang out for hours to warn local people to stay in their shelters. The church cried out for the indiscriminate Turkish bombing to stop. President Trump was asked if he would support sanctions against Turkey.
Let's see what happens. We are going to possibly do something very, very tough with respect to sanctions and other financial things.
In the meantime, the fighting goes on. These Christian fighters in the Syrian Democratic Forces visited this church, kissed the Bible, and headed back to the front lines to defend their homeland against the Turkish invasion. This is a group of Turkish soldiers praying the Quran before heading into battle. In a tweet, President Erdogan said he would like to kiss the foreheads of the heroes of the Mohammedan army. Some wondered why Erdogan would call a NATO army a Mohammedan army. Congressmen and women, military experts, and evangelical Christians continue to ask why President Trump decided to withdraw U.S. forces from the Syrian-Turkish border area. Here's CBN's Gary Lane with a look at the initial reaction to Trump's decision to leave their Kurdish allies in the lurch. It's followed by analysis with CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl in our studio.
A big backlash over President Trump's announcement that U.S. troops would be withdrawn from northern Syria. The outrage came not only from Trump's allies at home, but also from America's Kurdish allies in the Middle East. These Kurdish women protested Trump's decision to allow a threatened Turkish invasion near the Turkish border in Ras Al Ain, Syria. It's video like this showing American troops departing from positions in northern Syria that has them so upset. They fear America is abandoning them. Some lost husbands, sons, and brothers in the war against ISIS. Now they fear without American troops as a buffer, their longtime enemies, the Turks, will slaughter their surviving family members. The fallout in Washington even more troubling for the president. Even one of Trump's staunchest supporters, South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, publicly criticized the presidential decision.
If we abandon them, good luck getting anybody to help America in the future with radical Islam, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS.
Other Trump allies, like Trump's former UN ambassador Nikki Haley and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, also criticized the move. Some in the administration are saying only a small number of the U.S. troops are being pulled out. But at the White House Monday afternoon, the president said he's fulfilling a campaign promise to bring American troops home from foreign wars.
Why are you siding with an authoritarian leader and not our Kurdish allies?
Well, I'm not siding with anybody. We've been in Syria for many years. You know, Syria was supposed to be a short-term hit, just a very short-term hit, and we were supposed to be in and out. We want to bring our troops back home.
In response to the political backlash, President Trump took to Twitter, insisting, quote, "If Turkey does anything that I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, consider to be off limits, I will totally destroy and obliterate the economy of Turkey."
I've done it once. I did it with Pastor Brunson. You remember the Pastor Brunson? And they wouldn't give Pastor Brunson back, and they ended up giving Pastor Brunson back pretty quickly. Their currency fell at record levels, and lots of other things happened.
Also sending a warning to Turkey, Iran, with Foreign Minister Zarif voicing opposition to a planned Turkish military operation in northern Syria. Zarif is urging Turkey to respect Syrian sovereignty and integrity. And then there's the issue of 5,000 ISIS prisoners now guarded by the Kurds who might end up in Turkish hands. Many of the jihadists are from Europe and could either end up returning to unleash terror on their home countries or regroup inside Syria. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Julie, this war between Turkey and northeast Syria has really spread throughout the Middle East and affected nearly every country. What's been the reaction here in Israel?
Well, you know, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, he condemned the invasion, of course, and he also offered aid to the Kurds. He called them the gallant Kurdish people, and also some reservists. Dozens of Israeli reservist officers in the IDF called on the government to send humanitarian aid, food, clothing, military aid, intelligence, probably not soldiers, but you know, they could send equipment, they could help in other ways.
Yeah. You know, when I was in Kurdistan not too long ago, you know, they call themselves sometimes the second Israel. There's really an affinity between the Kurds and Israel that's really remarkable.
There definitely is. It's not really probably like anywhere else in the Middle East. They have a closeness to the Jewish people. And some say that even the wise men were Kurds.
That's right, and the Medes in the Bible. And you know, I think the fight that the Kurds have had, not only the Kurds, but the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is an umbrella organization that includes Kurds, Yazidis, Arabs, Christians, Muslims, all fighting against ISIS. And I wanted to say that really the ISIS prisoners are sort of really a key in this relationship between President Erdogan and President Trump. And here's why. On October 6th, when they made this agreement, there was an agreement that the Turks would take care of all the ISIS prisoners that have been captured in the last 2 years. And that includes more than 70,000 family members and ISIS prisoners. And yet, like 2 days later, the foreign minister of Turkey says, well, we're just going to be able to take the prisoners that are in the so-called safe zone that we want to establish. So just the larger percentage, a majority of the ISIS prisoners will be outside that security zone. A lot of people think that President Erdogan either misled, deceived, or lied to President Trump. Now, President Trump, when he realizes this, may make a change of policy. A lot of people are looking forward to a no-fly zone, and that would really help the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, remarkably.
That would be a very good thing. And Chris, is this a jihad?
I think it is. I mean, if you look at the evidence, you know, in a pro-Erdogan paper, it said that this was the army of Muhammad coming after the unbelievers. Just a few days after the incursion, the head of the religious affairs in Turkey was calling for Muslim conquest prayers from the Quran in all the mosques in Turkey. We're talking about over 80,000. Exactly, yeah. So this, in many people's views, is a jihad against the unbelievers.
Well, that's what Turkey's goal is, isn't it? To establish the caliphate with Mr. Erdogan as the head of the Islamic world.
Exactly. And
i.e. the whole world.
Right. And a lot of people look to Afrin, is a city in northwest Syria that was conquered by not only Turkey but the Syrian Free Army. These jihadists, they ethnically cleansed the city of hundreds of thousands of Kurds, hunted Christians, and burned churches. And a lot of people see this, what's happening in northeast Syria along this so-called security zone, as sort of a model of what Turkey is using to what they're doing now. And we'll see what happens. But appreciate your insight and expertise about what's happening in Israel that's really going to touch the whole Middle East and the world. And we'll see what happens, and we'll be praying for President Trump in this whole situation.
Alpha, Omega.